this section, we're going to look at advanced hacks. Review advanced hacking techniques as our chapter objectives. We're going to look at island hopping and pivoting, and also what's the concept of an exploit proxy. Island hopping and pivoting. As we compromise assets, the perspective of the attacker changes. The closer we get into the architecture of an enterprise, usually the more trusted position we have. We're located at the point of the compromised system. It allows us to leverage these trusted relationships that are typically set up in architectures. Island hopping and pivoting. So we have actually an example here, if you may recall. This is a separate services subnet, and out here is the hacker on his laptop. Well, the hacker on his laptop has to first penetrate what? The screening router. Once he does that, he's inside what we call the first hop. So the screening router is the first hop, hop number one. Then what he does is he will pivot and try to attack from this location. So if you look here, he's going to pivot and try to attack here, or pivot and attack this direction. These are pivot points. So we call this island hopping and pivoting. Each time you get a compromised asset, you pivot from that point and see what you can compromise from there. So next he gets into the separate services subnet. So now he's hopped through the router, hopped through the Bastion host. So he's island hopping. And then he hops inside the Bastion host, but outside the internal router. So now what he's done is he's hopped again. And then finally, he will hop and get to the internal network. And from there, he will set up an entire pivot point and pivot and attack anybody who's trusted to that internal network position. This is what we call island hopping. And then when you get to each point, you pivot and try to attack. And if you can't attack, you hop again and pivot. And each time you hop and you pivot, you start the entire hacking methodology over again. And this is what we do as red teamers. We get a position. Once we get that position, we try to pivot and attack whatever that position has access to that we don't. And what we do is we call it an exploit proxy. Because what it is it's a component of island hopping and pivoting. We take that inside machine, and what do we do with it? We plant our exploits there. Run all the exploits from the inside machine, and we have a lot of fun. Because we have the inside machine loaded with our exploits, and the inside machine's doing all our exploitation for us. Guess what? All their logs, all their monitors, everything shows that compromised machine as being the attacker, not us. So it's a lot of fun. To do this, you have to have an advanced shell. We mentioned an advanced shell earlier called Meterpreter. Meterpreter shell will support this up. The inside machine's not going to know about our network. Think about your routing. The inside machine's not going to know where we are at on the internet, so we have to add a route on the inside machine. We need tools, and the tool for doing that is the Meterpreter shell. The Meterpreter shell in Metasploit allows us to add routes and set up pivot points in our compromised assets. And here's what it looks like. So here we go, we're hopping along, and then we send the exploits all the way down into the inside machine, and that inside machine, we call it maybe exploits are us, and it just starts exploiting everybody within its reach. And remember, our position out here, if we look at the outer reds here of the hacker, our position out here is not as trusted as a position here, as a position here, here, and here. When we get inside, we have the most trusted level access. In most cases, we'll be able to leverage trust relationships. We'll be able to leverage domain controllers, net bias, all the other types of things that we use on our networks on a daily basis. Once we have this position of the inside machine and we put our exploits on there, we can pivot and attack any network or anything in reach of that inside machine pivot point. And that is exploit proxy for you. Brings us to the end of this chapter and the chapter summary. In this chapter, we've reviewed advanced hacking techniques, mainly island hopping and pivoting. Hopping to different locations, and when you get there, establishing a pivot point and using that location to do the attack from there. Because it changes the position of the attacker, and in most cases, results in more trust. This brings us to the chapter summary. In this chapter, we've reviewed advanced hacking techniques, mainly island hopping and pivoting. And remember, what we do is, each time we hop and compromise an asset, our perspective of the network changes. And we use that compromised asset as what we call a pivot point. And then we try to pivot an attack with that source of the compromised asset as the attacker. So any of the monitors or anything inside the actual architecture will show that machine that's compromised as the attacker and not us. It takes an advanced shell, and we have that in the Metasploit product with Meterpreter. And this concludes this chapter.